So the world was watching, wasn't it? There was this palpable hope centered on Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle from the Philippines, a real rising star.
Absolutely. He seemed genuinely poised to be the next pope.
Yeah, but then behind those, ancient Vatican walls, something happened, something shifted, and well, millions of hopes were kind of shattered.
It was a profound moment of disappointment for many across the globe.
Right. So this deep dive, this is really for you if you're fascinated by that whole interplay of power, faith, and I guess the future path of the Catholic Church.
It's a complex mix.
It really is. Today, we're digging into insights from a YouTube transcript. It's called 4 Shocking Reasons Cardinal Tagle Was Rejected as Pope, The Untold Vatican Truth, from the channel Vatican Unveiled.
A provocative title.
It is. And our mission really is to try and unpack those 4 surprising reasons why Tagle wasn't elected Pope. Maybe some secrets the Vatican would rather keep quiet.
Well, secrets might be strong, but certainly complexities often overlooked.
Okay, fair enough. Complexities. And what this whole story means, for the church and for all of us trying to figure out its direction.
Where it's heading, yeah.
So let's start with the man himself. Cardinal Tagle. He's from Manila, right? A long way from Rome.
Very much so. Grew up rooted in a simple faith, really. Humility, compassion, service, those seem to be the foundations.
And that shaped him into the person many thought was, right on the edge of the papacy.
And what's really striking, I think, is his ability to listen, not just hear, but truly listen, to the poor, the young, the suffering. He wasn't just reading reports from afar. He was actually out there, walking crowded streets, visiting slums, sharing meals. People saw him as, like, a friend. A brother.
Someone who got it.
Exactly. Someone who truly understood their lives, not just observed them.
And his reputation for kindness, for integrity, it just spread, didn't it?
It did, far beyond the Philippines. He became known as this theologian with real depth, but also clarity. His homilies drew huge crowds because he spoke about God's mercy, about the dignity of every single person. And he kept emphasizing the church as a home for the marginalized.
Which is interesting. Did that very focus, that image of him as the people's cardinal, maybe sometimes clash with the more traditional expectations inside the Vatican?
That's a really sharp question. Look, when Pope Benedict XVI made him Archbishop of Manila in 2011, it was significant.
Yeah.
It wasn't just local. It signaled Asia's growing importance. The Philippines became the symbol of hope. And his leadership there, it was all about social justice, interfaith dialogue, and really pushing that idea of outreach to the peripheries.
Going out to the edges.
Precisely, that radical idea of meeting people where they are, especially those on the margins.
So then him becoming a cardinal in 2012, that must have sparked real joy worldwide.
Oh, absolutely. He seemed to embody this vision of a church close to its people, serving with humility. He just resonated.
A different kind of church, maybe. Compassionate, inclusive.
Rooted in the gospel, yeah. And then he served in Rome, right, advocating for the poor globally with Caritas Internationalis.
The church's big charity network.
Exactly. So by the time the conclave came around, here you have Tagle. Young, energetic, deeply respected. He looked like the ideal person to bridge all these gaps.
Tradition and modernity.
Global, north and south.
Powerful and powerless.
He seemed to tick all the boxes for many observers.
So the hope for a Filipino pope, it wasn't just about, nationality.
No, not at all. It was about seeing the church reflect its actual global diversity.
Yeah. A leader who could speak to 21st century challenges with, fresh wisdom, courage.
That was the hope. But then a white smoke signaled someone else.
Leaving a lot of confusion, disappointment.
So with all that appeal, those qualifications, why? Why wasn't it him?
Well, to really get it, you have to go inside, metaphorically speaking, into the heart of the Vatican.
Where history weighs heavy.
Centuries of it. Tradition shapes everything. Okay, so reason 1. Let's unpack this. The weight of tradition and maybe the power of Europe.
That's a huge part of it. If you step back, the papacy for like 2 millennia has been deeply, deeply intertwined with European identity, culture, politics.
Right. Almost every pope has been European, many Italian.
Exactly. It reflects how the church built its global power structure from European foundations. And even now, look at the College of Cardinals.
Still heavily weighted towards Europe.
Very much so. A significant Italian bloc, lots of Europeans holding influence.
Even with Pope Francis, the first Latin American pope.
Yeah.
A huge shift, right?
Transformative, absolutely. But underneath, you could still feel those old patterns, those networks of influence persisting.
What kind of networks?
Well, European cardinals often share, Languages, educational backgrounds, the rhythms of life in Rome, they know each other.
Which builds trust, I suppose, especially in that intense, secret conclave environment.
Immense trust. So for someone like Tagle, despite being respected,
He's seen as an outsider.
by some, perhaps, not necessarily negatively, but different. His worldview shaped by Asia, not Europe. Cardinals might wonder, does he really get the complexities of Vatican governance, of European politics?
It sounds like his background, which was a strength in so many ways, might have kind of paradoxically become a hurdle.
It could be perceived that way. It wasn't about disrespecting him, but more a question of perceived familiarity with the specific mechanics of the Curia, the long-standing dynamics within European church life.
So these shared networks, they're not just social clubs.
Oh no, they're the invisible scaffolding of influence. Shared time in Roman offices, common languages, even graduating from the same pontifical universities. It builds a shorthand, a trust that's hard for someone outside that circle to replicate quickly.
Especially under conclave pressure.
Exactly. And there's this powerful desire for continuity, for stability. Many cardinals likely preferred a leader steeped in that familiar tradition.
Fearing disruption.
Perhaps fearing that a non-European pope, even one as admired as Tagle, with potentially different priorities, might upset the church's, let's say, delicate equilibrium, especially when the church is already dealing with internal tensions.
Right, they might see it as adding another layer of complexity, potentially even fracture rather than unity.
That could certainly be a calculation for some.
Okay, so beyond Europe's historical weight, there was another hurdle, not about faith, but about function, administration.
Yes. Reason two. The challenge of administration. And this is really interesting.
Because leading the Catholic Church, it's not just spiritual guidance, is it?
Not at all. It's also managing a huge, complex, sovereign entity. Bureaucracy, finances, global operations. It's immense.
So you need a CEO as well as a shepherd.
In a way, yes. That administrative capacity is absolutely vital for responding to crises, implementing reforms, maintaining unity. It's central.
And Tagle, his gifts as a pastor, a theologian, they're celebrated.
Universally, yes. But his administrative track record, it was viewed by some as maybe less extensive compared to others.
Especially given recent scandals, financial issues, the abuse crisis, demanding really robust oversight.
Precisely. Those crises put a huge premium on proven administrative strength and transparency.
And there was that specific episode, wasn't there, at Caritas Internationalis?
Ah, yes, that became a focal point. His leadership there. In late 2022, the Vatican announced this big overhaul of Caritas leadership.
Citing real deficiencies in management and procedural practices.
Right. Things related to organizational culture, HR, financial oversight.
Now, to be clear, this wasn't about personal corruption on his part.
Absolutely not. It's crucial to stress that. Tagle wasn't personally implicated in any wrongdoing. Many people attested to his integrity, his spiritual leadership there.
But the narrative emerged, didn't it? Of systemic challenges. Maybe accountability wasn't clear enough. Maybe financial controls weren't up to the Vatican's newer, higher standards.
That seems to be the gist of it. The Vatican intervention suggested a need for, let's say, more modern, agile management structures.
And even though he wasn't personally blamed,
nevertheless, the episode definitely raised questions, in the minds of some cardinals at least, about his readiness to oversee very large, complex organizations right away.
particularly when the Vatican itself is under huge pressure to clean up its own act, administratively speaking.
Exactly. Increased transparency, efficiency across the board. So any hint of administrative struggle elsewhere could seem amplified.
Which leads us nicely into reason 3, the shadow of scandal, and maybe just as importantly, perception.
Perception is huge in the modern era, isn't it?
Immense.
Yeah.
And for church leaders, doubly so. So for Tagle, even the perception of issues plus the complex reality of public image, it became a real barrier.
It seems so. You know, his openness towards LGBTQ plus Catholics, his regret over harsh language used in the past towards gay or divorced people.
That earned him a lot of admiration, especially from progressive Catholics.
Definitely. But paradoxically, those same qualities made him a target for criticism from more conservative groups.
Fearing he was straying from doctrine, creating confusion.
That was the fear expressed by some, yeah. Worries about doctrinal clarity.
But the biggest blow, perception-wise, really came from that Caritas controversy.
It appears so. Even with zero evidence of financial misconduct or abuse involving him personally, the Vatican audit did point to those organizational and procedural shortcomings.
Which led to his leadership team being dismissed.
Right. And in that high-stakes conclave environment, perception can be everything, or almost everything.
It matters as much as reality sometimes.
Often more, perhaps. The church has been under such intense scrutiny for decades of finances. It desperately needs a pope who can, without any question, restore trust.
So even a hint, even an indirect association with administrative weakness or organizational turmoil,
Could be enough to sway votes. It could make cardinals hesitant.
even if it feels unfair.
Fairness doesn't always factor into political calculation, even in a conclave. Tagle's charisma made him a media darling, no doubt.
But those doubts about his administrative record, stemming from Caritas, they proved hard to shake off within the College of Cardinals.
Seems that way. They lingered.
Okay, so we've had tradition, administration, perception. Reason 4 takes us into the realm of church politics.
Right, because beyond the prayers and the rituals, the conclave is also, well, a human event.
Full of intricate dynamics, alliances, political calculations.
Absolutely. Shrewd calculations, shifting loyalties. It's all there. It's a strategic environment.
Where just being admired isn't enough.
Definitely not. The college itself is incredibly diverse. You've got your Vatican insiders, your Curia veterans, and then you have the shepherds from the peripheries, the pastors dealing with realities on the ground far from Rome.
And Tagle was admired across these groups.
Widely admired, yes, for his pastoral heart, his global view. But admiration doesn't automatically translate into votes, especially through multiple ballots.
He had a solid block of supporters.
Exactly. Election often hinges on a candidate's ability to build and hold a strong, cohesive bloc, people committed to championing their cause round after round.
And the source suggests Tagle didn't quite have that.
It says he did not command a core base of loyal supporters ready to champion his cause through multiple rounds of voting. He had respect, but maybe not that hardcore faction.
And you have these informal groups, right? Like Team Francis, pushing reform.
Yeah, pushing synodality, inclusion.
Versus Team Tradition, focused on doctrinal clarity,
Yep.
preservation.
Precisely. Tagle might have been respected by both, but perhaps wasn't seen as the undisputed leader of either camp, strong enough to guarantee victory.
Regional interests play a part too.
A huge part. European cardinals, still very influential, naturally want to keep the papacy connected to their history, their traditions. While non-European cardinals, sometimes, they struggle to really unite behind one single candidate from their own regions. It fragments the vote.
And Vatican politics, it's subtle, isn't it? Lots of negotiation.
Extremely subtle. And Tagle's humility, his seeming reluctance to actively campaign or seek power.
A virtue, you think?
A profound virtue, yes. But in that specific environment, it might have been misinterpreted by some as a lack of political acumen.
Not playing the game.
Or perhaps not understanding how the game needed to be played to win in that context. It's a harsh reality, maybe.
And there's a desire to avoid splitting the church further, right? Find a unity candidate.
Absolutely critical. Cardinals are acutely aware of the need to avoid polarization. They want a leader who can hold things together amidst all this rapid change and uncertainty.
So Tagle's perceived closeness to Pope Francis. Good for some, but a red flag for others.
A source of hope for reformers, definitely. But perhaps a cause for caution for those worried it might deepen existing divisions rather than heal them.
That's such a complex web.
It really is. And this whole situation, Tagle's story, it really highlights this ongoing tension in the church, doesn't it?
Between progress and tradition.
Exactly. He stands as this vivid symbol of that struggle, balancing ancient traditions with this urgent call for renewal. He's seen widely as a leading voice for the progressive wing.
He's been quite open, hasn't he? Criticizing harsh treatment of LGBTQ plus Catholics, single mothers, the divorced.
Yes, lamenting how they've been branded and excluded. His whole approach seems rooted in trying to reconcile church teaching with people's actual lived realities.
Insisting tradition has to be alive, dynamic, responsive.
Right. Not static. Now, that advocacy for inclusion, it definitely drew fire from conservatives.
Worrying about doctrinal confusion.
That was the expressed concern. But Tagle himself, he resists easy labels. He absolutely affirms core teachings, but he insists they have to be presented with sensitivity without judgment.
Drawing inspiration from Vatican II.
Deeply. Advocating for that living tradition, faithful to the roots, but creative in responding to new challenges.
And that message resonates hugely in the developing world, right?
Yeah.
Especially Asia, where the church is booming.
Incredibly powerfully. His current job, leading the dicastery for evangelization, it's all about empowering local churches, forming new leaders there.
And he lived it too, didn't he? Famously using public transport in Manila.
He modeled that humility, which brings us to another key theme, the importance of humility itself.
A cornerstone of Christian leadership.
Absolutely. Popes like Francis, even Leo the Great way back, warned against pride, chasing status over service. It echoes Jesus himself. Came to serve, not be served.
And Tagle, with his approachable style, walking with the poor, he seems to embody that pastoral revolution Francis championed.
He really does. His humility isn't weakness. It feels like this quiet, steady commitment to others.
But, and here's the paradox maybe, how does that virtue play out in the political labyrinth of the Vatican?
That is the paradox. In that complex world where you often do need to assert a vision, build alliances, push things through, humility can sometimes be misunderstood.
Seen as indecision, lack of ambition?
Possibly. Or maybe just not forceful enough for an environment where strength, sometimes assertive strength, is often valued or required to navigate the power structures. It's a tough balance.
It really is. And this whole discussion, it touches on something deeper too, doesn't it? The sort of mystical aspect of choosing a pope.
The role of providence, the mystery of God's will.
Yeah. Faithful Catholics believe the Holy Spirit guides the cardinals.
That's the core belief. The tradition holds the Spirit, enlightens the cardinals, helps them discern the needs of the church, the right qualities in a leader.
But it doesn't override free will.
No, the Spirit doesn't dictate or force a decision. It's believed to work through the free, sincere deliberation of each elector. It's an interplay.
And each cardinal takes that oath, right, before God, to vote for who should be pope.
A very solemn oath. But Catholic theology also talks about God's permissive will, meaning the outcome is still shaped by human factors. The elector's openness to the Spirit, yes, but also their wisdom, their limitations, their biases. It's all part of the picture.
So Tagle not being chosen, it isn't seen as a divine rejection.
Not necessarily, no. More a reminder, perhaps, that the Spirit's ways can be hidden, surprising. There's this underlying belief in Christ's promise, I am with you always. Which means, theologically, the conviction is the Spirit won't let the church fundamentally lose its way, its essential mission, no matter who sits in Peter's chair. It's a perspective that helps contextualize these human outcomes.
Okay, so looking forward then, what does this all mean for Cardinal Tagle's future and for the church's future? He wasn't chosen pope, but his influence isn't gone, is it?
Far from it. He's still a very powerful symbol of that continuity with Pope Francis's vision, compassionate, pro-poor.
And his current job, pro-prefect for the dicastery for evangelization, that's a key spot.
Hugely important, right at the heart of the church's global mission outreach. He's overseeing support for developing world churches, forming new leaders. That's critical work.
And his style, personal encounter, listening that still inspires hope.
Immense hope, I think, for that inclusive, dynamic church, one that connects with young people, engages in real interfaith dialogue.
And maybe the conclave outcome, the setbacks, have actually deepened his credibility in some ways, shown resilience.
It's possible. His humility through it all has been noted. He continues to advocate tirelessly for social justice for the poor on a global stage. He's still a very beloved figure, especially in Asia.
So his future influence, it depends on what? Navigating those administrative questions, building broader support.
Probably a bit of both. How he handles ongoing administrative scrutiny, how he continues to build relationships within the Curia. But his core strengths, deep faith, pastoral sensitivity, global perspective, they make him absolutely pivotal.
Shaping the church's response to the big issues, poverty, migration, climate change.
Exactly. For many, many Catholics, he still embodies that hope for a church that's both faithful to tradition and open to the world, still going out to the peripheries.
You know, his journey, it really does seem to reflect the church's own struggles, its hopes, its deepest longings right now.
It really does. And his story suggests that true greatness, maybe in the church context, isn't about power or prestige in the end.
But about humility, service.
That seems to be the witness, a commitment to selfless service.
And his story holds up a mirror to the church, doesn't it?
A profound mirror. It asks some tough questions. Are we, as a church, clinging too tightly to old patterns, maybe stifling new voices, new perspectives we need?
Are we willing to risk discomfort, risk change for the sake of the gospel?
Those are the challenging questions it raises.
And for you listening, this deep dive, it shows that even in these sacred processes, human realities, perceptions, politics, They play such a decisive role.
Yeah, and that disappointment, setbacks, they aren't necessarily the end. Sometimes they're invitations, right? To deeper faith, maybe greater love.
The outcome of this whole tension, this struggle between tradition and progress, it feels like it will shape more than just the next papacy.
Oh, absolutely. It feels like it will shape the very soul of the Catholic Church for generations to come.
So, something to mull on. We invite you to think about how Tagle's witness and these themes we've unpacked today, how they resonate with your own thoughts on leadership, on faith, and that ongoing, really fascinating dance between progress and tradition.